Hey there, wicked listeners. Welcome to episode 3 of Wicked Crimes. As always, I'm your host, Jan Rood. This episode is a few days late, and you might be wondering why. Well, I was planning on covering another topic, but during the scripting process, I realized that I would need some more time on that topic. And I suddenly had to restart the entire process of researching and creating a full episode. The good news on that is that this week you will get both this episode and our normal Friday episode. If you're enjoying the podcast, please remember to leave a review and follow us wherever you are listening to right now. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Twitter under the handle @CrimesSelf, and on Facebook we have a group named Wicked Crimes. I'll leave a link to both in the show notes for you. Now, let's get into episode 3, the story of Josef ben Meddour.
Please be advised that this podcast contains content that could be harmful to some listeners. This includes, but is not limited to, strong language and graphic descriptions of violence, sexual activities, assault, and death. This podcast also engages in discussion regarding various religions, spiritual beliefs, and practices, some of which might be harmful or triggering for some listeners. Please reconsider before consuming this content. The information contained within this podcast is mainly gathered from news articles and official court documents where available. Should you have any more information, or if you know of any incorrect information in this content, please feel free to contact the host through the email found in the show notes.
Before I jump in, I want to apologize in advance for any proper nouns I might mispronounce during this case. This case comes to us from Sweden, and the victim is from Algeria, so I'm pretty sure I will be mispronouncing quite a few of the names in the story. My research on this episode came mainly from an article I found on the website of writer J.A. Hernandez. His research into this case was extremely well done, and he even had some extra information on the victim in this case that was invaluable. The rest of my research came from media articles and a few news stories and documentary snippets I found on YouTube. As always, if you have any more information on this case or know of any inaccurate information, please feel free to reach out to me via the email address in the show notes. I spend a lot of time on this podcast trying to debunk so-called religiously motivated murders. Cases where an investigation gets derailed because of a focus on the perpetrator or sometimes even the victim's personal beliefs. Or cases where perpetrators try to use belief systems to get leniency or even an acquittal for their actions. But I cannot give you a fair representation of these cases without admitting and looking into cases where actual Satanism played a role in the case. This is one of those cases. While we cover this case, I want you to pay special attention to the perpetrators in this case, and notice the difference between how these people acted and how people in other cases we cover act. There is a clear difference in how these perpetrators lived their lives, acted during the investigation, and after the investigation. But that will become clear as we go through the case. Before we pay any more attention to the perpetrators, I'd like to introduce you to Josef ben Meddour. Josef was born in the Kasbah of Algiers around 1965. The Kasbah of Algiers is the capital of Algeria. Algeria's official state religion is Islam. From my research, it seems that the same was true in the late 1900s. the majority of the population identified as Sunni Muslim. This bulk of religion sees acts of homosexuality as sin. This meant that Josef, as a homosexual, would not be widely accepted in Algeria at this time. At the same time, tensions in Algeria were rising and would eventually escalate into a full civil war, which started in 1991. A few years prior to this, around 1987, at the age of around 22, Josef was invited to join a friend of his on her travels through France and some Nordic countries. Josef accepted this offer and during his travels fell in love with Sweden and decided to settle there permanently. It was quite easy for Josef to fit into this new country since he was fluent in both the English and Swedish languages. Here, Josef often worked as a tailor, relying on his skill since he had never finished his school career. Josef was raised by his parents in Algeria, and from what I could find, he was not only accepted by them regardless of his sexuality, but that his family still loved and respected him. Josef was described as being kind and intelligent by his family. They spoke of him as someone who would always help others whenever possible, and even go above and beyond what was expected of him. On the article about Josef by writer J.A. Hernandez, he spoke of a story where Josef was once asked for a blender by someone. Josef left for a while, and when he finally returned to the person, he had brought 6 different types of blenders for the person to choose from. Josef lived in Sweden for 10 years. He frequented the single neighborhood and had also dated a Swedish man prior to his death. I'm certain that during the 10 years he lived there, that Josef had dated more than just one person. But unfortunately, I could not find too much information on his life during this time. So there is not much more I can tell you about Josef's life. On the 23rd of July in 1997, a 16-year-old boy was enjoying an afternoon walk through the Kiles Park in Gothenburg, Sweden. The park was less than 10 kilometers or 6 miles away from the neighborhood that Josef had frequented. During his walk, he discovered a body laying face down on the slope of a hill near an old water tower. Police were contacted and an investigation began. During their investigation, police discovered a bag of belongings and a cap next to the body, but no identification. A police officer on scene recognized the victim from the neighborhood that Josef had frequented, but he did not know his name. So, investigators quickly began to canvass the neighborhood. Here, they positively identified the body as belonging to the 32-year-old Josef ben Meddour. They also discovered that Josef was homosexual, that he had often been seen with a Swedish man whom he had been dating, and that in the days prior to his body being discovered, that Josef and his partner had been seen arguing. During the investigation, it was discovered that Josef had been shot in his back while attempting to flee the attack on him. Josef had managed to run down the sloped hill. In doing so, he had to hunch down a bit to retain his balance while running downhill. Due to the position he was in, the bullet entered through his back, went through his heart, exited the front, and became lodged in his knee. This caused Josef to fall down. After falling down, he was then shot in the back of his head. There was something odd found on Josef's body as well. 3 evenly spaced circular burn wounds were found quite close to each other on Josef's back. The bullet that went through his back had entered directly through one of these burn wounds. Investigators were unable to determine whether the burn wounds had been made prior to the attack or after Josef's death. When I was watching a video on YouTube about this case, a man that had been involved in the investigation remarked that these wounds made investigators look at the boyfriend. According to this man, they were hits of sadomasochism in the homosexual relationship that Josef was part of. I could not figure out whether this meant that investigators were told that Josef and his partner practiced BDSM in their relationship, or whether they believed that sadomasochism is a part of every homosexual relationship. Regardless, these burns, as well as the fact that the belongings found with Josef's body included a cap and belt that belonged to Josef's partner, set the investigators' sights directly on the boyfriend. As a result, the boyfriend was brought in for questioning and ended up being detained for 12 days. I found this extremely odd and looked into it a bit. Turns out, in Sweden, anyone suspected of committing an act that could result in a year or more imprisonment if found guilty can be remanded for up to 14 days. If a criminal investigation is not yet finalized by the end of the 14 days, it can be repeated indefinitely until they are either prosecuted or released. This basically means that if officers in Sweden has enough probable cause, they can indefinitely hold a suspect in custody until they either eliminate the person as a suspect or continue with prosecution. In this case, after 12 days, there was still not enough evidence to prosecute Josef's boyfriend, and he was also able to prove that he had not interacted with Josef in the days leading up to Josef's murder. He was subsequently released. Investigators also found some new information. Josef had been visited by members of the GIA group just days before his murder. The GIA was an Islamist organization that was actively participating in the civil war in Algeria against the Algerian government. GIA stands for the French name Groupe Islamique Armée. In English, they are known as the Armed Islamic Group of Algeria. Their purpose was to destabilize and overthrow the Algerian government in an attempt to create an Islamic state. Josef was openly opposed to the GIA, who by then had already been connected to acts of kidnapping, assassination, bombing of security forces and civilians, massacres of entire villages, the murders of expatriates in Algeria, terrorist attacks in France, and so much more. So the murder of a homosexual Algerian citizen openly opposed to them, even in another country, was not above their abilities and means. Investigators attempted to find a link between the murder and the GIA, but was unable to do so. It seemed as though Josef's murder might go unsolved. There were no new leads or evidence coming to light, and investigators were stuck. On the 19th of December, 5 months after Josef's murder, over 450 kilometers, or almost 300 miles away, in Stockholm, the capital of Sweden, this case was about to be blown wide open. A 23-year-old woman walked into the Stockholm police station and asked to file a complaint against her boyfriend, a 22-year-old man named Vlad. During her complaint, the woman told investigators that Vlad had beaten and cut her, but he had threatened to kill her children, and then eat her children. Vlad had also bragged that he and a friend of his, 20-year-old Jean, had murdered a gay man in Keeler's Park. She also told officers that she knew where the murder weapon was, a 9mm pistol. Officers in Stockholm quickly placed the call to the Gothenburg police and confirmed that there was an open case that fit the description that this woman had given them. The woman had told police that Vlad and Jean had been partying in Gothenburg with 2 other friends. After the other friends had left them, the 2 men were walking around the area when they met Josef in a park. They then invited Josef to join them for a walk and led him down to the old water tower. Here, they attacked him with a stun gun, which resulted in Josef running away. Vlad then shot Josef in his back, causing him to fall, after which Vlad handed the weapon to John, who then delivered the final gunshot. Stockholm police relayed this information to the Gothenburg police, who confirmed that the woman's story contained elements of the crime that only the perpetrator or someone present would be aware of. This was the break that blew the case wide open. Stockholm police immediately made their way to Vlad's apartment. Here, they found him on the steps leading to his apartment and immediately placed him under arrest. They found the 9mm pistol stuffed down his pants, fully loaded and ready to be fired. This pistol would later be positively matched to the bullets that were retrieved from Josef's body. Stockholm police also searched Vlad's apartment. This is where the case became extremely interesting. In his apartment, police found a satanic altar, various films depicting human abductions, pieces of human hair, a bottle containing human blood, human bone fragments, and a human skull. The following day, John was tracked down to his apartment in Gothenburg, where he was also arrested. When searching his apartment, officers found numerous firearms, as well as more satanic paraphernalia, including various types of metal music, which investigators described as being extremely violent. Police started to investigate Vlad and John. Vlad had an interesting identity. He had been born Shahin Kroshnud Shariz. At some point, he changed his name from Shahin to Nemesis. Vlad was just one of the aliases that he used, along with Flaxifer, Nemedial, Freyten and Victor Draconi. Jean was actually Jean Notfight, the lead singer of a Swedish melodic black and death metal band named Dissection. The 2 men were also founding members of a group known as the Misanthropic Luciferian Order, abbreviated as the MLO, and which is now known as the Temple of the Black Light. This group believed in what they called chaosophy. In essence, they believed in the Christian God, and even in his creation of Adam and Eve and the entire universe. They, however, rejected God completely and wanted to see his creations never have occurred in the first place. They wanted to either destroy it or obtain its retroactive non-existence through their rituals and dark magic. The group was founded on the belief that the physical world was inherently wrong and evil, and that true spirituality came from within a person. The group also taught misanthropy, which is best described as the hatred of a human species. In essence, they believed that the universe God had created, as well as the humans he populated the earth with, was faulty and a mistake. Thus their anti-Christian beliefs and views. This is the key difference I want to point out between this case and other cases. In other cases that have been linked to Satanism, like, for example, our first case, where the Satanic Bible written by Anton LaVey was discovered in a suspect's home, it was immediately assumed that because he had an interest in Satanism, that he would commit murder. This is not always accurate, and Satanists who follow LaVey's teachings, for example, actually revere human life as being sacred and sees the killing of another person as an assault on the sacred. While Satanists like Vlad and John have no regard for human life. This is why I caution against immediately assuming any case is connected to Satanism just because the person might have an interest in Satanism, especially if it is a path of Satanism that follows the teaching of LaVey or similar teachings. While there are groups like the Temple of Black Light or the Order of Nine Angels, which we will cover in a future episode, these groups are far less prevalent than groups that believe human life is actually sacred. The MLO was founded in 1995 by Vlad, John, and another member by the name of Johan Norman. The group remained relatively small, and at its peak had no more than 5 or 6 members. The group practiced meditation, invoking demons, and yes, the sacrificing of animals, while focusing mainly on cats that Vlad had bought through classified ads. As if the act of murdering animals were not bad enough, in the weeks leading up to Josef's murder, Vlad, as leader of the group, became more extreme. He eventually started to talk about committing human sacrifices, followed by a mass suicide. John and Vlad had even gone as far as to draw up a list of people they planned on sacrificing. This list included Johan Norman, who by this time had left the group, John's girlfriend at the time, and band members from John's band Dissection were also included in this list. Upon hearing this escalation, majority of the members of the group, which was actually just 2 or 3 people, decided to leave this group. I cannot help but wonder whether it was the sacrifice of others or their own planned suicide that led these people to leaving the group. Nevertheless, what remained of the group was made up of Vlad, John, and Vlad's girlfriend, the 23-year-old woman that had reported Vlad to police for assaulting her and threatening to murder and consume her children. After their arrests, both men initially denied having any sort of involvement in Josef's murder. They were, however, both remanded to custody, and, as we already found out, in Sweden, this can go on for quite a while. After being remanded, John decided to spill the beans. John confessed to Josef's murder by telling investigators that on the night of 21 July 1997, he, Vlad, and 2 other people had spent the night in Gothenburg. They had been drinking at various establishments throughout the night and had also been using amphetamines. By early the next morning, the two other people had left and gone home, leaving John and Vlad roaming the streets alone. As they were passing a local park, which was well known to be a cruising spot for gaming, according to John, Josef made a comment regarding the clothing the two men were wearing and asked, based upon this, whether they were Satanists. The two men claimed that they attempted to get away from Josef, but he persisted in questioning them and even showed interest in Satanism and their cult. During their interaction with him, they also claimed that Josef had repeatedly touched them, made comments on their hair and clothing, and that this, along with his speech mannerisms and other behavior, made it clear to them that Josef was indeed gay. The two men found this to not only be offensive, but also infuriating. So they invited Josef back to John's home. When they arrived at John's home, Josef had apparently become scared and refused to enter the home. So they then suggested that he accompany them to Keeler's Park, and they would continue discussing Satanism there with him. Before leaving his apartment, John went inside and got a stun gun and a 9mm pistol. He hid both weapons until the three of them had made it to Keeler's Park. At Keeler's Park, Vlad then took the stun gun from John and tried to use it on Josef. But the stun gun malfunctioned and did not work. This resulted in Josef attempting to run away, which is when Vlad fired the shot into his back, walked over, and then fired the second shot into his head. Officers approached Vlad with this story, and he quickly confessed as well, with one major difference. Vlad claimed that it was John who had fired both shots. During both of their confessions, both men insisted that Josef had been the one who followed them against their wishes, but he had been constantly asking them questions and attempting to touch them. They also admitted that while walking, when they saw other people approach, they would leave the path they were on and hide in the woods nearby until these people passed them so that they would not be seen with Josef. Now, I would not normally theorize on a case like this, but there is something regarding their confessions that just doesn't sit well with me. And based on the fact that both men lied about who fired the gun, I find it possible that there could be other aspects of their confession that was not entirely accurate. Let's go back to the start. The two men, who by their own admission were homophobic, just happened to find themselves near a well-known gay cruising spot. For those of you who don't know, gay cruising spots were quite popular in the 80s and 90s, in a time before social media and dating apps. This was an easy way for gay men to find each other and engage in sexual activities. Parks and bathrooms were the most common cruising areas, as you could easily explain your presence there without admitting that you were there to engage in sexual activities. They also offered secluded areas where the sexual activities could take place. Cruising spots were a necessity, especially in places where homosexuality was not widely accepted or even illegal. This also meant that cruising spots became popular even in countries like Sweden, where homosexuality was not illegal. The two men found themselves here just weeks after not only expressing interest in participating in human sacrifice, but actively attempting to plan multiple murders. Now, I'm not saying the men ended up here specifically with the intention of committing a murder. But if someone on their list was to be murdered so quickly after other people had left their group for planning those murders, they would of course be caught quite quickly. Whereas the murder of a stranger whose life they found offensive would be much harder to pin on them. We also know that Josef and his partner had argued just days before Josef was murdered. From some of the articles I found, it seemed that during these arguments, Josef and his boyfriend had broken up. This would also explain why he had not had contact with Josef in the days before his murder, and would explain Josef's presence at a cruising spot. We also know that Josef was a tailor. Now, the two men claimed that Josef identified them as Satanists by their clothing. I have a question for you. What do Satanists wear? Unless the two men had been out in clubs and bars, in robes and adorned with satanic symbols, I don't see how Josef could identify them as Satanists by just their clothing. I also don't believe that they wore any type of ceremonial clothing while they were out, because I'm pretty certain that either people would have noticed their odd clothing and mentioned to the police that these two very odd people were prowling the streets the same night as Josef's murder, or that it would have caused them some type of trouble earlier on in the night already. The only explanation left is that they were wearing normal clothes with pentacles or symbolism on it. Clothing that would make sense for someone in a metal band to wear. Someone like John. Either way, it seems natural that Josef would have struck up a conversation with them regarding their clothes, since this is a topic he is knowledgeable on. Why would Josef start up a conversation with them? Well, they were in a cruising spot in the middle of the night, so Josef may have thought that they were there to cruise. If Josef believed that they were there to cruise, it would only make sense that he followed them to a secluded spot somewhere. In the gay community, threesomes are actually quite common. So it is entirely possible that the two men made Josef believe that they were interested in sexual activity with him, lured him to a secluded area, and then attacked him. This makes more sense to me than the two of them accidentally happening on a gay man in a gay cruising spot, who then harassed them to the point that they decided to lure him to a secluded spot and then murder him. There is also another aspect to this: the gay panic defense. This defense is often used when the victim of an assault, attempted murder, or murder is a part of the queer community in some manner. It is usually used to claim that a gay man or a lesbian woman had come onto their attacker, and that their attacker then murdered them in cold blood out of fear of their same-sex attraction. A successful use of this defense often sees the perpetrators get a severely reduced sentence. And in fact, the gay panic defense was extremely prevalent in Sweden at this time. 2 years prior, in 1995, a gay hockey player named Peter Carlson was stabbed 64 times, resulting in his death. This attack was carried out by a member of a neo-Nazi group. His killer claimed that Peter had told him that he was attractive and attempted to force himself on him, which resulted in the attack. This claim succeeded, and the killer received only an 8-year sentence for his brutal and continued attack. Vlad and John's version of events come awfully close to being a gay panic defense, claiming that Josef was following them and refused to leave him alone even after they told him to do so. Unfortunately, I could not find much information regarding their trial, so I'm not sure if they ever used the gay panic defense outright. Based on their confessions, the complaint by Vlad's girlfriend, and the items found in their homes, both men were officially arrested and charged. Vlad was charged for the murder of Josef ben Meddour, assault and threatening his girlfriend, illegal possession of a weapon, and grave robbery in connection with the body parts that were found in his home. It's also worth noting that Vlad was suspected of murdering a 16-year-old girl named Malin Olsen by strangling her in a cemetery in Gothenburg the year prior. However, neither men were ever officially connected to that case, and it still remains open. John was charged with the assistance to murder and the illegal possession of a firearm. The trial proceeded quite quickly, based on the confessions made by the two men, the testimony provided by the previous members of MLO, and the paraphernalia found in both men's home. During the trial, it was made clear that a major part of the motive for the murder was homophobia. But the trial also focused heavily on the satanic beliefs of the two men. In the end, the murder was registered as a hate crime, meaning that the Swedish police believed that Josef was targeted for his sexuality. The murder was never proven to be a ritualistic crime. On the 6th of July of 1998, nearly a year after Josef was murdered, the two men were found guilty. John was sentenced to 8 years in prison for his charges, and Vlad was sentenced to 10 years for his charges. This might sound light, and it is. It is, however, important to note that in the 90s, the typical sentence for murder in Sweden was 10 to 14 years, while voluntary manslaughter usually received between 6 and 8 years imprisonment. This meant that Vlad had received the lightest possible sentence, while John received the harshest possible sentence, so that both men's sentences aligned with each other. The two men attempted to appeal their sentences, and on the 25th of September 1998, Vlad's appeal failed, and his 10-year sentence was confirmed. John, on the other hand, saw his sentence increased to 10 years, so that it would match Vlad's. Both men ended up spending only 7 years in prison for the murder of Josef ben Meddour. In 2004, they were both released. On the 13th of August 2006, John's body was found with a single gunshot to the head, surrounded by a ring of candles and with a satanic book next to him. He had committed suicide. His brother Emil made a statement regarding John's death. Quote, "The Satanist decides of his own life and death, and prefers to go out with a smile on his lips when he has reached his peak in life, when he has accomplished everything and aimed to transcend this earthly existence. But it is completely unsatanic to end one's own life because one is sad or miserable. The Satanist dies strong, not by age, disease, or depression, and he chooses death before dishonor. Death is the orgasm of life, so live life accordingly, as intense as possible." Vlad, on the other hand, as far as I can gather, is still in charge of the Temple of the Black Light, And he even authored several books for this group, with the last one that I can pin down being released in 2010. In one of the YouTube videos I found, one of the people involved in the investigation mentioned that Vlad was still a part of the satanic movement in both Norway and Sweden, and that he had gone on to marry the girlfriend who had filed the complaint against him that led to the case being solved. And they even have children together now. While John's band Dissection did not survive this ordeal, in 2004 a statement was posted to their website, which is also now gone. The statement was made by their former press secretary, and I'd like to read it to you. Quote, "These are the hard facts to the contrary of all sensational speculations in the tabloid press media. On the 18th of December 1997, John, together with fellow MLO brother Vlad, was arrested and accused for having shot a 37-year-old homosexual man to death with 2 shots on July the 22nd, 1997. The 37-year-old man was killed out of anger because he had harassed the 2 accused men. While John and Vlad, by mutual agreement, did their best to mislead police investigating the shooting by telling different stories, staying true to this mutual agreement and their brotherhood, they also learned that some of their earlier so-called brothers and friends were stabbing their backs. For example, former Dissection guitarist and MLO member Johan Norman, with his girlfriend, actively helped the police and the prosecutor to nail John and Vlad by telling everything he could, as well as fabricating the most exaggerated and unbelievable lies. This was the biggest possible betrayal and treachery from someone both John and Vlad before had regarded as one of their closest brothers and friends. It was obviously not enough for Johan to run away, hide from, and betray everything that Dissection and MLO stood for. Now, he would openly and in public take his duplicity to new heights. Johan and his girlfriend were also assisted by, among others, Nils Carlin, all defectors from the MLO, in their cowardly acts of public defamation and betrayal during the trial. John and Vlad were more or less on trial for being Satanists, and thus supposed dangerous persons. Proved, note the irony here, by the testimony from betraying friends, such as Johan, as well as the prosecutors and police's manic efforts to, in front of the court, paint the worst possible picture of the 2 accused men. The prosecutor was displaying evidence of John's and Vlad's satanic beliefs, things that didn't have a thing to do with the crime they were accused of, like pictures of their personal satanic altars and satanic/occult paraphernalia from their homes, to show the court what kind of extreme persons John and Vlad were, and how deeply they were devoted to Satanism, turning absolutely everything they could come up with against the 2. Well, of course they were Satanists. They didn't deny that. But being a Satanist is not a crime. But it nevertheless made them look real bad. And, with the lack of hard evidence, this definitely was crucial to their conviction. The distasteful reveling in the case and the speculations by the sensationalist Judeo-Christian media only made things worse. It's also remarkable to see how blind people can be, willing to believe just any bullshit that they are force-fed by the media, the police, and prosecutors, not realizing that these are just puppets of a corrupt system, where money is the only value, and public information is subject to selection based on sensationalism and selling points for selling single copies. And what could be more commercially hard-hitting than a satanic murder? Denying the crime, they were in 1998 sentenced to 10 years prison. Jean was, besides being sentenced for assistance in the shooting, also convicted for illegal possession of firearms. Jean's comments to all those brainwashed, ignorant fools condemning the killing and stating their opinions concerning me or Vlad. I just want to say, fuck you. Who are you to judge anyone? End quote. This statement perfectly reflects the men's belief. They believed that it was their right to murder someone in cold blood. They were angry for being held accountable. They were angry at other people for speaking out about their intents and motives. And for all that, they just served 7 years in prison. While this episode might reinforce the idea that all Satanists automatically equal murderers, I hope it shows to you the difference between Satanists and other believers of religious and spiritual paths that align to neither Christianity nor Satanism. And, if we go deeper, that not all Satanists are murderers. Just like there are different denominations in Christianity, there are also different denominations in Satanism. And not all of them are as hateful as these men were. Josef's body was repatriated to Algeria after his murder. He was laid to rest in his hometown, and years later, he was joined by his parents in the same cemetery. Josef, may you rest in eternal peace. Thank you for listening to this episode of Wicked Crimes. If you enjoyed it, please remember to leave a review and to join us on social media. Until next time, stay safe, wicked listeners.